full event in the series. Our opening panel with Roger Mudd, when the security of citizens is jeopardized, when immediate decisions must be made outside of standard procedures, when citizens and leaders, under the pressure of the need for action, must reconstruct the relationships established under very different circumstances. The very definition of crisis is not an irrelevant question. When thinking of what constitutes a crisis, we sometimes overlook those that creep up on us over time, whether they be related to the environment, health, poverty, the economy, or security. Our guest this evening, Dr. Gro Brundtland, one of the truly consequential leaders on the international scene over the last 2 decades, is positioned as well as anyone to help us understand some of these critical questions. She is a medical doctor, as was her father, but also like her father, she was from her earliest years a dedicated political activist. This rare combination led to a stellar public career, first as Minister of the Environment in Norway, and then at the tender age of 41, as Norway's first woman Prime Minister in 1981. In her country's parliamentary system, she served 3 separate times as Prime Minister for a total of 10 years in the office. In 1998, she assumed the important international position of Director General of the World Health Organization. But this cursory description overlooks the deeply significant international impact she has had during the course of her career. In the 1980s, she chaired the UN World Commission on Environment and Development. The 1987 report, now famously known as the Brundtland Report, introduced the concept of sustainability, which underlies virtually all environmental and developmental policy throughout the world. It was an example of genuine transformational leadership that revealed with tremendous clarity the links among issues of poverty, health, economic development, and the environment. Her tenure at the World Health Organization, which ended last May, was equally transformational. Here's how the Wall Street Journal began their story marking the end of her term in office. The World Health Organization's swift response to SARS gave the agency a front and center role in global public health. It was no fluke. It was what Gro Brundtland has been preparing for since she took over as the agency's chief in 1998, and in some ways for years before that. Now, as she gets ready to retire, the agency is trying to build upon her efforts to transform an often misunderstood and ignored bureaucracy into an undisputed custodian of global public health. We are honored to have Dr. Brundtland with us this evening, and we are also honored to have her husband Arne with us as well. He may play a role as we go on, because you'll find that you'll learn, in case you didn't know this, that sometimes even medical doctors get ill, and you'll recognize Dr. Brundtland's voice is maybe not what she would like it to be, so she may rely upon a little backup as we go through. After her talk, of course, we'll take some questions and answers. But we look forward to hearing from her, and please join me in welcoming her. Dr. Brundtland.
Thank you very much for that very kind introduction. And the fact is, as I entered the plane from Oslo to Detroit on Monday with my husband, my voice disappeared. And it was worse when I spoke at the State University of Michigan. But for the first time in my 30 years in public office, I had to let my husband take over part of my role in delivering my speech. And if necessary, I will do it again, because I think it's better that you hear me responding to your questions, because that I wouldn't let him do. So it is a true sign of progress that fine institutions like the University of Richmond now runs the first undergraduate school of leadership with a mission to educate people for and about leadership. I myself never had the opportunity to enjoy such training. My leadership learning comes through a combination of observing leaders at work on the one hand, and exercising my own leadership responsibilities on the other. And it comes from having had the good fortune of growing up in a family where values, principles, and responsibility were high on the agenda. I retain one overall message from what I have seen and experienced in the leadership field. You cannot learn how to lead as if leadership was a distinct science. What you can learn, however, is lessons about leadership, lessons that you can draw inspiration from. The way you lead is a very personal thing, shaped by your personality, your experience, and values. Whatever you may learn about leadership must therefore be complemented by real-life experience. Some say that basic leadership values apply to all kinds of leadership, be it in the private sector, in politics, or at community level. That may be true. In looking back at the positions I have held and had the privilege to fill, there are certain lessons that have held throughout. First, leadership is about values. I strongly believe in value-driven organizations, organizations that hold ambitions for a different and better future. It is values that bind people together. At WHO, we have the vision of health for all, an obvious target in a world where we see health as a universal human right, but yet a goal so hard to reach. Second, effective leadership begins and ends with the way you work with people. Any leader is herself a person with needs, dreams, and aspirations. Leading others means connecting with the needs, dreams, and aspirations of other people. Not even a military structure can rely on pure command and orders alone. Leading organizations, businesses, and countries is, in essence, a question about having ears and eyes for what motivates people, people as individuals, and people as groups. Third, leadership is about movement. The whole point of leading is the ambition of getting somewhere, extending the health services to the poor, selling more products, or attracting more members. Leadership is the opposite of status quo. It is about motivating people to join you in moving forward, in making a difference. And fourth, effective leadership is about trust, credibility, and accountability. Credibility in the mandate that you have as a leader, and credibility in the way you exercise leadership in your daily work. Decisions must be sufficiently anchored, understood, and accepted. Only then can you move forward, and the way you lead must be accountable and transparent. And fifth, leadership is about hardship. Achieving your goal is always a great satisfaction, But being a leader also means being ready to be a leader when the winds blow against you and you must guide your organization through hard times and sacrifice. These observations are not based on any scientific collection of facts and figures. They stand out as some key pillars in what it means to be a leader, and they may help shed some light on how I have approached some of the challenges and even crises that I had to confront as Director General of the World Health Organization. We who live in the rich part of the world have never had better opportunities to lead healthy lives and enjoy meaningful jobs. And yet, half of the world's population live on less than $2 a day. Hundreds of millions of fellow human beings experience a deep health crisis. And their crisis is gradually affecting us. The separation between domestic and international health problems is losing its usefulness as people and goods travel across continents. More than 2 million people cross international borders every single day, about 1/10 of humanity each year. Humanity has made tremendous progress. We know how to prevent and treat malaria. There are vaccines for yellow fever. There are treatments for TB. Smallpox has been eradicated, and polio is on the verge of following down the same lane. New technologies are breaking new ground every day. The striking feature, however, is that while we top up our own vaccinations and bring medications, when we travel to developing countries, the people living there, those threatened most by these diseases, don't have this access. 3,000 children in Africa die every day from malaria. Every day. They die of vaccine-preventable diseases like measles by the hundreds of thousands, and people are dying by the millions every year of HIV/AIDS. So here is the challenge. Today we cannot only look at health as an issue of how many get ill and how many recover, who lives and who dies. We must look at why. And we must broaden the debate to accept that health is an underlying determinant of development, of global security and stability. For this we can consider the short, sharp shock of conflict, and perhaps more importantly, the silent and eerie march of diseases which devastate populations over time. These are the stones with the largest ripples, and the ones that go unnoticed until it is too late. It was clear to me from the outset that my main challenge at WHO would be to place health at the top of the global development political agenda. We cannot hope for change and real handling of the global health crisis unless we catch the attention of world leaders. When I took office as Director General in July '98, WHO was by many seen to be in a crisis itself. It is fair to say that the handling of the organization had been significantly weakened over several years. It translated in many directions. WHO was too absent from the key global public health arena. It had problems in raising additional funds. Its voice did not carry sufficient weight, and the agency experienced a kind of marginalization. My first priority was to demonstrate that there would be change from day one. At WHO, my message was twofold. To the staff, my message was, keep up the good technical work. To the new senior management team, the message was, within 100 days, we will present to our constituencies and to the outside world a very clear picture of our priorities, a transparent and understandable structure of how we are organized, and clear policies that can create synergies between our different areas of work. My next priority was to back up our message with solid evidence. This is something I learned as a student in medicine. Interventions and diagnosis must be based on the best available evidence. I brought this lesson with me to national politics and then into our work in the UN Commission on Environment and Development. I believe this is key. I believe that solid evidence has been instrumental in bringing environmental issues onto the many political agendas, and also the links between environment, development, and the economy. The same has to hold true for global health. It connects with my leadership lesson on accountability. Your possibility to lead others, people as well as government representatives, depend on how you can argue and back up your case. My task was to drive home a message that most professionals in the medical world had internalized since long. We know that ill health quickly may lead to poverty, and we grasp that poverty in turn leads to ill health, feeding a downward spiral. So how can we make a difference and help deliver the Millennium Development Goals of halving world poverty by 2015? The key answer is to foster development. We wanted to document this insight and make available the evidence in a language that could reach well beyond the public health community. We wanted to build a message that could persuade presidents, prime ministers, and finance ministers that they indeed are health ministers themselves. I asked Professor Jeffrey Sachs, now at Columbia University, to lead a group of 18 distinguished economists and health experts to make sense of the links between health and development. Their message was crystal clear. Disease holds back development and weakens societies. Malaria alone taxed Africa's combined GDP by about $100 billion compared to what it could have been if that disease had been tackled 30 years ago when effective control measures first became available. The Commission has presented a decisive argument for the need to invest in health as part of a basic development strategy. It concluded that health systems spending $10 or $12 per person per year has no chance, are not able to provide even the most basic health services to the people they serve. Their report calls for a six-fold increase in health expenditures in the developing world. The Commission, and that sounds, impossible, but believe me, it isn't. The gap can be found by increasing from 0.1% of the US GDP, you find most of these resources that would help fill that gap. This is not out of the question. And it would have a great, not only human, but economic impact, because it would influence the global economy, not only the economies of the countries that we are speaking about. So the Commission identified how you could hugely improve health outcomes for the poorest: AIDS, TB, malaria, childhood diseases, and maternal conditions. These are the crucial ones. As many as 8 million lives would be saved each year, and a 6-fold return on the investment in terms of economic growth would be the result if we managed to channel enough resources into health for the poorest countries in order to achieve the Millennium Development Goals. At this moment, I will ask my husband, please, you keep also close to this one. I believe you hear me well then. Yeah. So, Olav, I'm here now. Here.
Okay.
So then. Okay. I'll take this behind. And I'll come back. At some stage, I'll come up and take over from him.
Thank you. Competition in the global marketplace will not provide enough incentives for poor countries to move out of poverty. The poor need help, not any kind of help, but the right kind of help. Strict prioritizing of aid has also become a matter of necessity. My main point is that the report of the Commission gave the WHO and many, many others reliable and trustworthy evidence for good political advocacy. Gradually, the G8 leaders' summits listened to our message, and gradually, health and development climbed on the global agendas in the UN, at the World Bank, and other financial institutions, among governments and parliaments around the world. Leadership is about creating momentum. Momentum is the meaning of change and also of crisis management. This year, 2003, I believe, will be remembered as a year of success for global public health. There have been milestone events, both in preventing chronic illness due to tobacco and in containing a dramatic global infectious disease threat, SARS. The world nations came together in 2003 and agreed to tackle a deadly threat to present and future generations, the tobacco epidemic, now also spreading into the developing world at alarming speed. The first International Health Convention, negotiated under the mandate of the WHO, was unanimously supported by the World Health Assembly in May and signed by more than 40 nations already in June. Tobacco consumption leads to more than 4 million deaths annually, a figure expected to rise to 10 million before 2020, which places tobacco at the top of the list of the global burden of disease. A more unified and focused WHO, underpinned with solid evidence in the message, could mobilize new effects, new partnerships, and new initiatives. We could really make a difference. One such initiative came in the field of immunization. In 2000, we created the Global Alliance for Vaccination and Immunization, Gavi, a partnership of US agencies, the World Bank, the pharmaceutical industry, private and public donors. Thanks to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, we could make an effective launch and really move forward. Why did we do it? Because we had to confront the crisis. For many years, the rule of thumb was that 30 million children grow up without being routinely immunized. As a consequence, 3 million of these children will die from diseases that are preventable. The mission of the Global Alliance and its partners is nothing less than to immunize every child everywhere. In just 3 years, the Alliance has helped deliver hundreds of thousands of vaccines, and the number of children not reached is going down, and so is the number of children dying. It all amounts to progress, development, and hope. The same kind of mobilization is critical to address the HIV/AIDS pandemic. Today, the fact of the threat are widely acknowledged. There is important action, notably via the creation of the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. But much more is needed to turn this tide, which is setting development back at such a dramatic speed. 20 years ago, HIV was a specter, all but invisible on the horizon. We in the rich world have to a large extent managed to control it. Antiretrovirals have been made available to those who could afford them. People in countries with health insurance gained access, giving tremendous hope for a longer, healthier life. HIV diminished for those in the rich countries as an urgent public health problem. Today, more than 42 million people are HIV positive. 30 million of them are living in sub-Saharan Africa. They are trying to survive in some of the poorest countries and conditions, with no access to the most basic health care, much less sophisticated and expensive treatment. Many have died, many are dying. Mothers and fathers, teachers and nurses, and other health professionals, civil servants, miners, and soldiers. They are leaving a huge social and professional gap, an imminent threat to countries struggling to develop. We will see the effects of this unfolding tragedy in decades to come. Between 1990 and 2000, the Human Development Index declined in nearly 30 countries. Well over 1 billion people, more than 1/5 of the world population, are unable to meet their daily minimum needs. Almost 1/3 of all children are undernourished. The average African household consumes 20% less today than it did 25 years ago. Poverty breeds disease more than any other single cause, just as disease breeds poverty. In countries in crisis, rates of severe illness and death are high. In some settings, the daily death rate is at least double the expected level. One of the key signs of a failing state is its growing inability to provide even basic services to its population. A descent into poverty and lawlessness leads to rapid declines in health indicators such as infant mortality and life expectancy. Southern Africa is a case in point. A number of political, economic, and social factors have played a role in creating a situation where more than 12 million people in that region are now affected by famine. But there is no sudden event which has caused this crisis. Rather, it comes as a result of a long process now compounded by the AIDS pandemic, which has reversed much of the tremendous progress Botswana had achieved and is now becoming a profound burden in South Africa, as well as Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Malawi. I recall my visit to Botswana ahead of taking office at the WHO in 1997. Botswana was a success story, also in the health sector. Colleagues from the medical community in Norway had worked closely with the health authorities in Botswana to develop the district health services. The conventional estimate was that life expectancy in Botswana was just about to pass 70 years, a tremendous achievement. But by the time the devastation of the AIDS pandemic ravaged the trend, and researchers from the University of Harare scaled down the prognosis to around 40 years of age. The experience over the past year show that we neglect countries in crisis at our peril. Economic crisis in distant countries now reverberate in financial markets around the world. Mass migrations from failed states can topple governments and provoke conflict, even genocide. Pandemics such as AIDS can cut so deeply into the basic fabric of countries that their social, economic, and political repercussions destabilize whole regions. Resentment and hostilities flow from inequality and deprivation. All over the world, extremists use familiar frustration to justify their actions. It is no accident that they take refuge in the debris of failed states where the consequences of crisis fuel frustration and insecurity. The terrorist attacks on New York and Washington, combined with new fears about the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, have taught us how much even the most sophisticated societies need to do to face up to the possible deliberate use of chemicals and biological agents to cause harm. Then there are the acute crises. How do we address them? Here is one very concrete example. SARS put the world on high alert and drove unprecedented cooperation to stop a disease which had an immediate and negative impact on markets, on tourism, on trade. One person infected staying in an international hotel put the world at risk. Unlike other diseases which we can prevent or treat, SARS was undiagnosable, untreatable, and for 1 of every 6 people, fatal. The way the world responded to SARS was global public health at its best. It demonstrated that we can be able to manage our interdependence if we do it the right way. It was not simple. This was new. We needed to act, and act quickly. We needed to convince governments, airlines, the media, and our own actions and recommendations were well founded. When WHO issued its first ever global alert on March 15, we had no time to lose. A decision had to be taken based on WHO constitution and general mandate. No rules and regulations of a specific nature could be used. This experience was new. Never had a new and unknown disease spread so rapidly, traveling along major airline routes to reach distant areas at great speed.
Thank you very much. Very good to have a husband. Well, at this moment, I believe I was very lucky to have the leadership experience of being a prime minister, of taking charge during crisis, even of having been a young environment minister in my own country when an oil blowout blackened the waters of the North Sea back in 1977. The lesson is, from all of this experience, in crisis, take immediate responsibility, do the right thing, see to it that based on evidence, you can face questions and criticisms in the future with confidence. I believe that WHO regained authority as the lead agency in global health, and the superb work done by our experts in building a solid surveillance system to monitor outbreaks of communicable diseases played a key role in winning the first phase of this fight. Scientists, under the leadership of WHO, put aside their differences and drives to be the first, and came together to share sequencing and to study results. Doctors from around the world came together in virtual conferences to share advice on how best to treat patients. Public health authorities from opposite sides of the globe flew to Geneva to share their experiences with SARS, their successes and failures, with 192 member states at the World Health Assembly. And as a result, in just 4 short months, we had identified a new disease and contained a global outbreak which could have become a global catastrophe. In short, there was global mobilization to fight a global threat. The result is that we probably won't find ourselves 10 years from now down the road with SARS endemic in the countries which can least afford it, devastating lives and economies, because we acted to make sure that wouldn't happen. With the help of its collaborating centers and partners, from January 1998 through March 2002, the WHO had investigated 538 outbreaks of international concern in 132 countries. The most frequently reported outbreaks were of cholera, meningitis, hemorrhagic fever, anthrax, and viral encephalitis. During the past 2 years, WHO, working with partners from the Global Alert and Response Outbreak Alert and Response Network, has launched broad and effective international containment activities to around 25 countries, ranging from Afghanistan to Hong Kong, from Ethiopia to Gabon, from Kosovo, Saudi Arabia to China. I am putting emphasis on this experience because it underscores 2 important messages. The first is that we are making progress in connecting knowledge, surveillance, and awareness in a world made so interdependent by health and disease. The other is that we can only succeed in this by making profound innovations in the way we work together. Today, WHO staff, consultants, collaborating centers, and expert advisors have privileged access to all 192 member states. This privilege allows WHO, in the interest of safeguarding international health, to transcend the prevailing political reality in which access to critical expertise might be denied because of one country's political relationship with others. SARS demonstrated dramatically the global havoc that can be wreaked by a newly emerging disease. It has also been an extremely demanding test of the effectiveness of WHO and its partners to mount an adequate response, get teams and supplies into countries, and ensure adequate monitoring and reporting. The reality is that public health is, as never before, a priority on the global agenda, for the simple reason that so many of the challenges we face have a global impact today, requiring global solutions and a global response. Global surveillance provides a mechanism by which information about potential biological threats can be gathered from all parts of the world, analyzed and disseminated rapidly. We are talking about a truly global public good, improving our efforts to manage interdependence. It is indeed telling to read about the spread of what became known as the Spanish flu in 1918, about how the world was taken by total surprise and without any proven mechanisms to mount effective lines of defense. The pooling of information from different countries also allows a more comprehensive picture of an emerging threat to be developed than would be available from any one single national source. Such information often provides vital early clues about the nature of an emerging infection and the types of control that are most likely to be effective methods. Now, ideally, national and local surveillance systems would be the strong base of this global system and give it great sensitivity and speed. However, national surveillance systems around the world, in wealthy as well as developing countries, suffer from a long history of underfunding. In many developing countries, surveillance is patchy outside large disease control programs, such as those for AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. And reporting is slow, it is incomplete, and unreliable. As a further problem, some countries are reluctant to reveal the presence of true magnitude of an outbreak for fear of the economic consequences. I believe you saw China's reactions as a case in point. In fact, even in neighboring Canada, some of the same occurred. Often, the practical measures being taken by WHO to institute and improve global surveillance and international response are currently having to compensate for weaknesses in national systems while also encouraging improvements in those national systems. Action simply must be taken, given that we all live in a world where biological dangers, including emergence of new diseases, more virulent forms of old diseases, or deliberately released pathogens, are real threats. So a world where 1 billion people are deprived, insecure, and vulnerable is also an unsafe world. In poor countries where people feel powerless and watch as much of the world gets richer, they can bundle hatred and channel it in the most devastating ways. A giant construction site where the World Trade Center used to be will always remind us of a world of conflict, a world divided. It exposes a new awareness of our combined vulnerability. I find this telling. The security analysts who used to count warheads and troops to understand the balance of power is now looking for indicators that can signal a potential failed state. In the late 1990s, the CIA concluded that the child mortality rate was very effective in signaling just that. It is yet another illustration of how the health of people matters to the health of states and communities, as well as regional and global peace and security. We need to address the underlying causes and arrest this descent before we are forced to deal with the ultimate consequences: famine, unrest, and human suffering. Consequences which will touch everyone. And we need to put our creativity and imagination at work and build global mechanisms that can help us manage the new interdependence. There are promising signs that policymakers are taking the signals. Health is now on the agenda of decision makers far beyond the health sector, and new alliances are formed to fund immunization, as well as increased efforts against HIV, as I have mentioned. This is all well, but it must only be a beginning. The poor, on the one hand, need to increase their investment in health. Even poor countries can do more, focusing more on what really counts. Be it modest step by modest step to invest in their own people, in health and education. The rich need to increase their official development assistance and earmark a higher proportion of that to health. The research agenda needs to change to include a much larger focus on the diseases of the poor. We need a transfer of knowledge and technology to the poor countries. Market mechanisms need to be mobilized, and the public sector needs to provide visible incentives. There is no way that market mechanisms alone can solve these problems. This is self-evident, but we need to mobilize the forces of the private sector, the voluntary organizations, the forces of democracy to make this happen. We need mechanisms that safeguard the health and social sector as the new round of trade talks get underway. There is no way to find solutions to global challenges, even in trade, without addressing also social and health issues. We already see some headway towards making HIV medicines available at a lower price, but there still is a long way to go. A globalized society needs more globalized solutions. And to conclude, we need a shift in awareness towards the idea of building global public goods that can help us reap the huge potential benefits of globalization, while at the same time containing the risks and vulnerabilities that comes with it. Of course it can be done. Never have we had so much knowledge. Never have we had so much evidence on what works and what doesn't. But to make progress, we need the voices, the talents and dedication of all, including all of you present here today. Thank you very much.
I guess we
I'll be interested in your insights about convincing China, where SARS originated earlier this year, how to become more forthcoming is in their self-interest to become a respected, responsible great power. So how do you convince them of that? And second part of the question is, you had mentioned that you believe public health is a fundamental human right, health for all, and disease knows no political boundary. How do you ensure Taiwan, which is not a member of the WHO, can also get the proper medical care from this preeminent health body? Thank you.
Now, on the first on this first question about China, I believe the decisive thing that happened was that the Chinese leadership, due to the world attention to what was happening with SARS, were forced to reassess and to question their own leaders in the health field and their own, their own accountability and transparency. Because the tradition in China to try to cover up, to try to solve without admitting, in this case, obviously did not work. The whole world was watching every day on BBC, on CNN, all over the media, that things were happening in China that they refused to address, and it became known, and I spoke out. I said that we hadn't had responses from China, although we had asked for it, and I said this was a pity and we really needed China to open up. And they realized that they were losing out. So this experience for Chinese leaders opened some eyes and contributed to change in China. So it had the benefit of teaching a very important fundamental lesson. But why it happened was the global media and the fact that communication, even in a society like China, cannot be subdued fully. Voices were heard, emails were sent. WHO knew, although we publicly and officially didn't get responses from the authorities in China early, we knew. And so this situation illustrated something that I think my political experience helped me decide. My staff were trying to get support from me several years ago to be able to develop this system where they took information from wherever it came, from NGOs, from internet, and they checked the sources and they got the knowledge about outbreaks wherever the source was. The only question was, can it be confirmed? Not who gave the information. And I said, certainly. But at that time, we didn't have a resolution in the World Health Assembly giving explicitly WHO the mandate to do this. Because the whole system is an intergovernmental system, and traditionally, the governments were supposed to report. And in the regulations, the question, has the government reported? No. Then there is no issue. Well, I knew this is not possible in a modern world. So I let my staff develop with NGO support, with Canadian support, because in Canada, they had developed, spent money on connecting rumors and different kinds of evidence from around the world to identify outbreaks. And WHO could use it, develop it into a network that could function. And this again was a reason that when SARS came, although it came in a part of the world where they are used to put a lid on things, the lid was off. Because we knew. But so I struggled to have them officially confirm what we already knew. So this was an important, and I think it was a lesson to China and to other countries that it is not a good idea to believe that you will benefit from trying to conceal when you can work with others in an open and transparent manner to try to solve problems instead of concealing. Now, on the Taiwan question, I'm more reluctant to really give you a very long answer. The short answer is this. Taiwan is given Taiwanese institutions. They all have access to the WHO intranet, to our knowledge base. There is no real cutting off of knowledge to Taiwan. Then it would be a major problem. However, this is a political struggle going on, and the United Nations has, until now, stood with a one China policy. And as long as this is the case, the same happens in WHO as in all the other international, the UN-based institutions. There are some exceptions because Taiwan, because of the history, you have WTO, where Taiwan has another place in the system, because Taiwan was there representing China, and when China entered, Taiwan was, they had to negotiate to live with Taiwan. But the point is this, for political reasons, and the constitution of the United Nations system, the one China policy carries the ground at the moment. But the people of Taiwan are not being left out from health information or from our global alert and response network. We sent experts to Taiwan. We did with Taiwan, for Taiwan, what we did for others. And we just told China to have done it. We said we will send experts to Taiwan. And the Chinese ambassador knew that in Geneva, knew that he couldn't protest. We did it. He didn't like it. But again, you have to overcome barriers by making decisions. I was imagining what could he do if he had protested during the SARS outbreak to us sending experts to Taiwan. China would have been in an even worse position because I would have let it be known. Yeah.
Dr. Brundtland, as the first female Prime Minister of Norway, some say that women bring a distinctive leadership style to their positions. Do you agree with that assessment? And furthermore, what advice would you give to other global women political leaders in positions such as Prime Minister or President?
On the first question, I'm convinced that there are experiences in life and things that women bring to the table which would be left out unless women were there together with men to lead. And as long as the female component was very low or non-existent, there was an imbalance. But from that general awareness, you cannot generalize and say that women leaders are basically different from male leaders. We are all different human beings. And although there are certain experiences and maybe even tendencies in men and women where you have averages which differ, these Gaussian curves are very much crossing each other, and you can find women who have a lot in common with a typical male leader, and you can have males who maybe would have more of the more typical average woman leader. However, my main thing is, unless we use human resources fully, which means you develop and you inspire and you use in society both men and women equally, you are losing out human imagination and abilities. This is the main reason, I think, in addition to just general human rights perspectives, that you need to mobilize women as well as men in societies, also in political positions. So that's would be my main answer also, to inspire women to be as ambitious as men with regard to taking on responsibilities, also in democracies, in the political field, and in business and administration and other parts of public life.
About the AIDS program in Africa, how far has the WHO reached the crisis?
A little higher.
Okay. About the AIDS program in Africa,
Yeah.
how far has the WHO reached the crisis in low health environments like Kenya and Zimbabwe? The AIDS crisis.
Yeah, did you say how has WHO
Reached the crisis? How far have they reached the crisis?
reached?
Yeah. How far have they been able to do something about the...
Well, okay, just so that I'm sure what you're asking. Let me say this. The human family, the international community, and the people in Africa themselves have to be confronting this crisis. There is no institution, no individual that can solve that problem. No organization, and certainly not the World Health Organization. The World Health Organization is an international institution, intergovernmental one, with a budget of $2 billion over 2 years, which means we have $1 billion to deal with trying to combine the knowledge and the efforts of the governments and the societies around the world to address public health issues. The AIDS problem, which is a major one, is a development problem, is a challenge to the whole world. We talk about completely different kinds of resources. I spoke earlier about the report from the Sachs Commission that said we need a six-fold increase. No, we need an increase from, I don't think I mentioned the number, but it's an interesting number. You have many African countries with an investment in health of $10 to $12 per person. Unless you get that number up to $60, there is no way that these countries can have a basic health service which functions, which can even take tests so that they can identify and diagnose AIDS and even think of treating it. And the whole educational challenge of teaching people how AIDS spreads, how to prevent it, it's a societal challenge for the countries themselves and for the international community to be supportive in making the difference. We have dealt with AIDS in Europe, in the US, by education, by family planning, by medical interventions, by medications. And so this is a challenge that goes to the world. And you see, I say this because sometimes people believe that out of our hundreds of international organizations, or UN so-called, should be solving a problem. But the UN is nothing but the totality of all the people in the world, their leaders, their governments, their commitment. So unless we give the UN the resources and the potential to really make a difference, and that means the democracies in all of our countries around the world, including the US, must be supporting the international organizations in such a way that they can be effective in filling the gaps, in bridging the differences, in seeing that every child gets education, in seeing that the Millennium Development Goals are reached, which, by the way, also includes AIDS, dealing with AIDS as an international collaborative effort. So WHO, UN, the UN AIDS, but all of us who are donors, whether we give money or our own time, the development community, many donors like Norway, like the US, Britain, all are part of the solution. But the gap in funding is so great that we need, a real gap, a real jump to a certain different level before we can make a real difference.
Time for maybe one more question.
How does the WHO's vision of development, you've mentioned development several times, right, differ from or align with the vision for global development of the WTO, the IMF, the World Bank?
Well, the institutions you mentioned, the WTO now gradually has 2/3 or 3/4 of the number of members that the WHO has. It used to be WTO, when it also had another name, used to be not representative of the whole world community. It was a certain number of countries, the more advanced, who had an institution that dealt with global trade patterns and relations. But now the developing world, China, major players are gradually coming into WTO, which makes it a global institution. That means the same governments send their representatives and make decisions in WTO as they do in WHO. We are in the same capital of Switzerland, Geneva, and in principle, there should be no difference in the vision and the attitudes. If the governments of each nation state has a policy which is consistent, and the representatives from that government go to WHO to deal with health issues, go to WTO to deal with trade issues, go to UNEP in Nairobi to deal with environment issues, it should all amount to a consistent policy. And it doesn't always, but if we go back to the nations, we have the same thing. You will see that the minister or the here secretary who deals with environment, or who deals with trade, who deals with health, will not, and certainly their officials, will not say the same thing on every issue. But if there is good leadership in government, and if there is consistency, you must have a policy that covers the agenda in a consistent way. You give the right aspects or visions on health, on environment, on foreign policy, on trade, and it all has to go together. Unless each nation can do it, the world cannot do it, because we are still a world of intergovernmental institutions, not super governmental. We haven't built yet so much of a rule-based system that goes above and beyond each member state. But the world, of course, as we develop conventions, like the Tobacco Convention, those conventions create international frameworks that apply to everyone. You have it in the environmental field. You have it now for the first time in the health field. And you have it in trade and in several other areas. A rule-based international system is gradually coming. It's too slow, but that's where we are going. And you know, the thinking that one superpower can decide the rules of the world is not something that can last, is not something that will be accepted. So to the extent that there are some people who think in that way, I'm sure it is just an intermediate phase in world development, because we need legally based frameworks across borders in a globalized world.
Dr. Brundtland, thank you very much, not just for your words this evening and bringing the benefit of your experience to us, but also for the time that you've given us the last couple of days. You've been very generous with our students and faculty, and we appreciate that very much. So we'll welcome you back here anytime, and thank you once again.